Welcome to Justice with Faith. As you know, the United States have been going global about the leak that happened at the United States Supreme Court when it comes to abortion. Let me tell you a little bit about the processes of the Supreme Court. When an individual files a petition with the Supreme Court, it doesn't mean that your case will be heard, and it doesn't mean that you have a right or an entitlement to be heard by the justices. Once you have met all of the standard requirements for filing a petition with the Supreme Court of the United States, it is then reviewed and considered based on the criteria. First and foremost, before it can be heard by the court to make a decision on, you must have at least 4 justices that deems that the case may be substantial enough to be heard and reviewed. So what does that mean? Out of approximately 10,000 or more petitions that are filed with the Supreme Court every year, approximately 150 of them are actually considered and distributed through the court. And of those 150, you may have about 50 to 70 of them that are actually decided on. So even if you're able to file the petition, you have to meet certain criteria for it to even get to a point of wanting to be distributed. So what does that mean to have your case distributed amongst the court or conferenced, so to speak? What that means is that the standards have been met in terms of formatting, and the issues that are brought before the court that are to be considered extends beyond just the individual, meaning that it must have a broader impact beyond the person that is filing or in reference to the one individual. For example, let's talk about this abortion matter. The issue of abortion, Roe versus Wade, is something that's impacting the United States. So that is a topic or case that would more than likely be heard, which is being considered right now because, we know we have certain leaks that have occurred within the justice area of the court. And that is concerning to most Americans. And I must also say it is alarming to me, and I'm very empathetic and concerned about the risk that whomever leaked this preliminary report or opinion, should I say this preliminary opinion out, has basically adversely put our justices at risk, and we can't have that type of demeanor. So let's go back to the process. So whenever you write something to the Supreme Court in terms of a petition, you're going to have to demonstrate where this matter can impact a broader scope of the population. So we're talking about abortion and the right to life and the right to choose. Now, for me personally, I'm not in support of abortions, but I'm not necessarily against it either. And because there are certain circumstances that warrant such actions. However, I think that we should be considerate of what it is we're doing and when. And what the framers are not telling people about the abortion process is actually when life begins in terms of an adverse impact on the fetus. So let's talk about that, because I'm calling on all of your neurologists and biologists to talk about this, and your GYN doctors, because when a fetus is in conception, of course, we look at that's when life begins. But I think the ultimate impact is when does the abortion process impact the fetus in an adverse manner? So let's talk about that. What most people do not understand is that a fetus, the brain begins to develop in 5 weeks, and the neural tube begins to develop. So now you're talking about the neurological system is in development. So we can assume that there is going to be an adverse impact on the fetus as a whole. A fetus begins to take its first swallow and urinate at 11 weeks. So they'll be getting the life processes in 11 weeks. And at 21 weeks, a fetus can survive outside of the womb of its mother, providing that it has the appropriate support medically and environmentally to sustain life outside the womb. So I think that late term abortion should be something that the Supreme Court really take a look at, because we need to be concerned about that happening. This is why at the initial framers of abortion, they proposed it during the first trimester, because the first trimester is approximately 12 weeks. And so that's right at the beginning when the fetus begins its first bodily activity. And that means at 11 weeks, it begins to swallow and urinate. So it's carrying out life functions. So we definitely don't want to do anything to harm a fetus once they begin their life processes. Now let's backtrack to the 5 weeks. When you're talking about the brain forming, I think it's very, very conscionable for us to do something like that. So I think that they need to really look at what it is and when it is appropriate and when it's not appropriate. Then some would say, well, what about when a woman is raped? Yes, when she's raped, I feel that at the beginning of the process, they should form a DNC when she's raped, providing that she actually provides that information. And what a DNC is just a scraping of the uterus to remove any tissue. And it's just a 5 or 10 minute process. And if it's happening at the onset of the rape, then it won't be that detrimental to the individual or to an unborn fetus. We also need to look at now, as Americans, we're pushing the medical form of abortion, which they have pills that women can take that will force them into a miscarriage. So, because of the nature of abortion, yes, I do believe a woman should have a right to choose what happens to her body because ultimately she knows her body. But however, when it comes to aborting fetuses, I think we should have some criteria for legality with that. So now let's talk a little bit further about this process. Think about how would you feel if your brain started to develop and your neural tubes start to develop. Think about what that means in terms of sensation, feelings. Do we really want to impose undue just to an unborn fetus when we could have an adverse impact on their physical being? I'm thinking that late term abortions should be out. That's just my opinion. That doesn't make it right. It's what the public decides, it's what the justices decides, it's what the government decides. But I think for me, there needs to be consideration of when the brain and the neural tube develops and when the fetus begin taking its first bodily activity. And that's where we need to look at how to draw the line with this process. But certainly we need to also consider when there's a medical need. And sometimes the need is either life or death between the fetus and the mother. Now that is a unique situation, and there's always an exclusionary process with abortions in anything that we do. So I think that we need to think about what's happening and how it's happening. We need to look at how it is impacting the unborn fetus, because keep in mind, if a woman is pregnant, and it doesn't matter what stage of her pregnancy she's in, if anyone causes trauma to her and she loses the baby, they will be charged with murder. And it doesn't matter whether she's 1 week, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 7 weeks, 10 weeks, that individual will be charged with murder. So we need to look at that. So when we're talking about pro-life issues, we also need to talk about the fact that if we're going to be pro-life as a nation, then we shouldn't be in support of execution of individuals. We need to ban executions altogether. We need to also think about what does that mean when an individual experiences trauma and they are pregnant. So we can't say under one era, we're okay with committing executions of individuals that we feel have committed crimes, but it's not okay to execute an unborn fetus, because if you do the same to an unborn fetus, then you will be charged with a crime. So there's like a double standard here, and we need to look at what we're doing. And there needs to be some specific criteria in terms of time period. And I think it needs to lie within the development of the neurological system or the central nervous system. and the time that the fetus begin to take its first bodily activity, which is swallowing and urination, because those are the first activities that they take. And if we draw the line at that perspective, I think we will offer justice with a balance. And you notice I said justice with a balance, because we will be looking at the best interest of the fetus without creating adverse impact. But we will also be looking at the rights of the mothers to choose. And that's, you have it with Social Justice with Faith. I am Dr. Marla Crawford, your host. Have a great day.